Hey everyone, before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because this story is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Hit that bell so you can see how humanity's quiet power shakes the galaxy itself. Elena Ward sat alone in the cell, the hum of the orbital detention spire vibrating through the cold metal floor beneath her. The room was small, sterile, and designed to erase individuality. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers interlaced, a posture of calm defiance. Outside, the patrol drones circled like disinterested predators, indifferent to the life contained within the glass walls. The galactic authorities had long dismissed humans as inconsequential, a minor species from a backwater planet with little to offer the vast, interconnected systems of the galaxy. Elena had been warned this prejudice would make her fate easy to ignore, but she refused to yield entirely. The interrogators arrived in their usual rhythm, suits crisp, expressions perfectly neutral. They treated her not as a person but as a minor anomaly, an irritant to be processed and removed. One of them, a tall humanoid with mottled green skin and retractable mandibles, leaned close enough that she could feel his exhalation through the glass. "You know, humans are fascinating in how fragile you are," he said, his voice mechanical and curious, almost amused. "You barely survive your own planet's conflicts. And yet here you are, in our custody, like a mouse in a lion's cage." Elena did not flinch. She had expected this type of mockery. She had faced worse in her short, confined life. "I am not fragile," she said simply. "I endure because I must. I survive because I know what is worth protecting." Her voice carried the kind of calm authority that made even the seasoned interrogators hesitate. They laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor, a ritual acknowledgement of human stubbornness. One of them pushed a button, displaying a hollow projection of her alleged crimes. "Interference in classified operations," it read. In practice, the accusation was meaningless bureaucracy. She had stumbled across an experiment that was never meant to be observed, and her curiosity had marked her for extinction. She did not argue. Words would not save her here. She asked only once for a single thing, a message to be delivered to her husband. A small hope, a final act of connection, a fragment of life beyond this sterile cell. It was ignored, logged instead as request denied. Non-essential. In the galaxy's calculations, Elena Ward did not matter. She was a human and humans were expendable. The days folded into nights that never came, the spire's orbit ensuring a perpetual twilight outside the observation window. Each step of the routine felt designed to strip away her presence, to reduce her to a number on a screen. She endured the examinations, the probing questions, the simulations meant to break her will. She endured silently, as humans often endured, quietly, without spectacle, with dignity that even her captors could not quite extinguish. Then came the enhanced interrogation. The protocols claimed it would yield answers faster, with minimal physical distress, but the machinery was unreliable. The guards operating it were indifferent, following procedure without concern for outcome. Elena's calm endurance ended not with a scream or struggle but with a quiet cessation. Her life, measured in a ledger somewhere far above the orbit of her prison, was closed. Human female deceased. Case closed, the logs read. The bureaucracy moved on immediately. Another prisoner arrived, another schedule to be maintained. To the galaxy nothing had happened. Elena Ward, with her intelligence, her courage, and her fleeting humanity, was already erased from immediate memory. Her absence was invisible, her significance null. But elsewhere the effects of her death had only begun. Her absence would ripple outward, unnoticed by the spire but unstoppable in consequence. There was one person who had always understood her value, who had seen her as more than a statistic or an inconvenience. One person who would not allow her death to go unanswered. That person would awaken a storm the galaxy had never known, a reckoning that began quietly but would escalate with precision and inevitability. In the cell's final silence, Elena's gaze lingered on the wall, imagining the touch of a hand she would never feel again. Even in death, her mind traced the path to him, the man who carried her world in his heart, the man who would become the galaxy's most unanticipated predator. And somewhere deep within the cold metal of the spire, systems whirred on, oblivious to the consequences building quietly around them. For now the galaxy slept, convinced of its own security. But the story was far from over. Humanity had been underestimated once again, and the cost of that error was about to be measured in ways no one could predict. Caleb Ward sat at his desk on Earth, the soft glow of the city lights reflecting off the glass window beside him. The notification arrived quietly, buried in a channel only the most discreet operatives could access. At first he thought it was a misdirect, a system error. His eyes, sharp and precise, scanned the message. Elena. Deceased. Official records confirmed it. The words felt hollow, yet they carried a weight that pressed against his chest with a cold inevitability. He did not shout. He did not curse. Caleb had trained himself to respond with control, to temper emotion with action. In his line of work, reaction was a liability. He leaned back, hands folded on the desk, and exhaled slowly. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. Outside, the city thrummed with life, unaware that one of its most unassuming citizens had just been informed of a loss that would unmake distant systems. The public knew him as a logistics consultant, a man who coordinated planetary supply routes and administrative projects with efficiency and discretion. Few understood the depth beneath that surface, the hidden lattice of skills, experience and protocols that he carried. Caleb Ward was not just a civilian. He was Earth's Reaper, a role whispered about in classified files and rarely acknowledged even in the upper echelons of human governance. Humanity's quiet predators were hidden by design. The galaxy had never been allowed to see them. He opened a sealed communication channel, the interface blinking with a code that only a handful of operatives could interpret. The holographic display presented encrypted dossiers detailing Elena's final movements and the official logs of her detainment. Caleb's eyes traced each entry with meticulous attention. The Spire's personnel had acted as expected, indifferent, detached, following protocol without deviation. He noted the enhanced interrogation, the rapid escalation, and the final report. Every procedural flaw, every lapse in judgment, and every casual act of cruelty was catalogued in his mind. For a moment, Caleb allowed himself a private acknowledgement of grief. It was brief, contained, measured. He would not allow it to cloud judgment. Instead, he began preparations. He accessed a restricted database few humans had ever seen, one that detailed the Reaper protocol, the emergency measures authorized when a human civilian had been unlawfully killed. The protocol was not an overt act of vengeance. It was a precise, sanctioned intervention designed to restore balance, to ensure accountability, and to enforce consequences with an efficiency that the galaxy often underestimated. Caleb did not move with haste. His preparation was deliberate, ritualized, each action a step in a sequence ingrained over years of training and refinement. Weapons were checked not for aggression but for functionality. Data feeds were cross-referenced for vulnerabilities. Travel routes were mapped for speed and discretion. Even the simplest tasks were executed with care, reflecting a mind attuned to both strategy and patience. He paused to consider Elena's last request, a message never delivered. Her voice, though absent, echoed in the space between memory and reality. A quiet ember of human connection that remained despite the bureaucracy's attempt to erase it. Caleb allowed himself a silent promise, a commitment that he would honor the trace of her final wish. The galaxy had overlooked her significance. That mistake would not be repeated. The first signals of inquiry went out, subtle and bureaucratic, framed as routine questions regarding interstellar detention practices. Caleb did not intend to strike immediately. The initial phase was observation. The galaxy was arrogant in its assumption that humans were insignificant. They would continue to underestimate him as they had underestimated Elena. The key was to maintain control, to draw attention without revealing intent. Despite the meticulous planning, Caleb's thoughts were not consumed solely by strategy. Memories of Elena intruded unbidden. The way her gaze met his with unwavering confidence, her quiet strength in moments when others faltered, her refusal to accept that humans were inherently powerless. Each recollection reinforced his resolve. This was not about revenge alone. It was about restoring equilibrium, about asserting that humanity, no matter how underestimated, would not be dismissed without consequence. Caleb's preparations extended beyond the physical. He reviewed the network of human operatives capable of covert support, ensuring redundancy without drawing attention. Every contingency was anticipated. Surveillance measures, potential mercenary interference, automated defenses. He understood the galaxy's tendency to act with impunity, and he planned accordingly, shaping each move with precision to avoid unnecessary exposure while still signaling capability. As the hours passed, the distant spire containing Elena's final moments became more than a location. It became a symbol of failure, of arrogance, and of the galaxy's blind underestimation of human resilience. Caleb's resolve hardened. The quiet predator of Earth was preparing to move, and the galaxy would not know the storm until it was already upon them. Finally he paused, hands resting lightly on the edge of the console, and exhaled. The first phase of action was ready to commence. His next steps would carry him across light years, but not in haste and not recklessly. Every system, every officer, every protocol that had permitted Elena's death would be scrutinized. Every error would have its consequence. And yet, the execution of that consequence would be meticulous, silent, and inevitable, reflecting a human capability the galaxy had never truly understood. Caleb's eyes lifted from the records. Outside, the city continued to breathe, oblivious to the storm about to be unleashed from its midst. Humanity's quiet predator was preparing to step into a galaxy that had long ignored its presence. One man, armed with precision, grief, and resolve, was about to ensure that the careless systems which had allowed Elena Ward to die would pay attention. The first ripple of that reckoning had already begun. Caleb's ship departed quietly, slipping through the orbital layers above Earth without fanfare. There were no announcements, no escorts, no alarms. The vessel was small, unremarkable to the casual observer, yet it carried the weight of an entire planet's hidden capabilities. Within the cockpit, Caleb monitored the coordinates of the detention spire where Elena had been held. Every calculation, every trajectory had been cross-checked against known patrol patterns, security grids, and galactic traffic channels. Mistakes were unacceptable. The galaxy had never noticed humanity. They had labeled Earth's inhabitants as fragile, inconsequential, incapable of meaningful projection. That misconception would prove to be the first and gravest error of the system. Caleb reflected on this quietly, his hands steady on the controls. He did not relish fear or chaos, but he understood power, and he understood how easily the arrogant could crumble before it. As he approached the outer reaches of the occupied sector, subtle disruptions began to manifest. Communications flickered inexplicably. Automated surveillance arrays reported anomalies without pattern. Caleb noted each occurrence without surprise. The galaxy had grown dependent on systems and protocols, and those systems had vulnerabilities, a fact that humans had quietly exploited for decades. He entered the spire's vicinity at a calculated interval when patrol rotations left a minimal signature. Even before sensors could identify his vessel definitively, the internal systems of the spire began to respond in ways unaccounted for. Doors locked and unlocked erratically. Power grids shifted voltage. Security cameras blinked out momentarily. Caleb's presence was not a crash or an explosion. It was a ripple, subtle and insidious, the quietest form of intrusion a predator could employ. Inside the spire, officers began to notice failures. Lights flickered in corridors, automated turrets powered down for seconds at a time, and biometric locks hesitated. Panic was not immediate. The galaxy's custodians had long relied on the assumption that humans were incapable of meaningful threat beyond their planetary confines. They had never learned caution. Caleb did not rush. He had no desire for spectacle. His objective was singular: to locate Elena and retrieve her remains, to confirm the failure of the spire's oversight, and to demonstrate with measured precision that negligence carried consequence. Each step, each adjustment, was deliberate, a silent affirmation of the discipline and restraint that defined him. He moved through the spire with uncanny accuracy, bypassing systems without triggering alarms, observing staff reactions from hidden vantage points. Individuals began to report minor malfunctions. Doors that should not open, sensors that misread, communications that failed at critical moments. Fear began to seed itself in the ranks. It was quiet at first, almost imperceptible, but the subtleties compounded into a growing awareness that something was not as it should be. In the central detention hub, the chamber where Elena had been held remained pristine and untouched. Caleb approached it with reverence, his mind cataloging every procedural failure that had led to her death. He accessed the secure terminals, cross-referenced the logs, and confirmed the absence of any message sent on her behalf. The bureaucracy had been efficient in ignoring her. The galaxy had been efficient in pretending it did not matter. Caleb's response would be equally precise, equally undeniable. He knelt before the chamber, retrieving her remains with care. Each motion was purposeful, unhurried, a testament to the control he wielded. The officers who observed from surveillance feeds began to register anomalies in their systems with increasing intensity. Confusion became anxiety. Anxiety became fear. None could interpret the source, only that their protocols were failing in ways inconsistent with any known variable. A senior officer attempted to issue orders, but his commands were intercepted by cascading system failures. Sensors displayed multiple false positives, cameras showed corridors empty when staff were present, and doors led to dead ends. The Spire's custodians realized too late that the galaxy had misjudged humanity. Caleb's presence was not merely a violation of protocol, it was a demonstration of the calculated patience and unseen precision of a predator that had been dismissed as a prey species. He did not speak. There was no need. The systems themselves bore witness to his passage. Automated defenses deactivated as he approached, doors opened without manual input, and cameras oriented themselves to provide a clear path. He moved with the certainty of someone who had already won the mental game before engaging the physical. Fear spread silently among the staff, unacknowledged in their reports but undeniable in every hurried glance and trembling gesture. Finally, Caleb stood before the chamber's main console, confirming Elena's final location and the sequence of events that had led to her death. He whispered her name once, softly as though she could still hear him, before securing her remains for transport. The Spire's operators scrambled to regain control, issuing alerts and mobilizing security measures, but every move was anticipated, accounted for and neutralized before it could have effect. Caleb activated the transport system, initiating a silent departure. The Spire remained in partial disarray, the subtle failures continuing long after he had left, a lingering signature of the quiet predator who had entered and exited with absolute discretion. The galaxy's custodians were left to wonder, to question, to acknowledge that the human they had dismissed as harmless had demonstrated capabilities far beyond what they could comprehend. As he navigated back toward deep space, Caleb allowed a single thought to occupy his mind. The galaxy would have to learn that humanity did not act for spectacle, did not move for vengeance alone, but measured consequence with unerring precision. The first ripple of that understanding had begun, and the full force of it had yet to manifest. The story of humanity's quiet apex predator had begun in earnest, and no system, protocol, or officer could ignore the implications for long. News traveled slowly at first, whispers carried across secure channels and classified comms. The Galactic Council, accustomed to measuring humans as inconsequential, found themselves facing anomalies they could neither explain nor contain. Detention Spire reports detailed malfunctions, security breaches, and the disappearance of Elena Ward's remains, each event traced with frustrating precision back to a single operative, Caleb Ward. Yet even as the anomalies multiplied, no one could discern his method, his pattern, or his motive. Caleb moved deliberately, aware of the galaxy's growing attention. He did not act for spectacle nor for intimidation. Each step was calculated to restore balance and enforce accountability. The officers who had dismissed Elena Ward's life as inconsequential now faced the consequences of systemic arrogance. Automated defenses, fleet patrols, and bureaucratic oversight failed in ways that demonstrated a singular principle. Humanity had underestimated what it could not perceive. The Council convened in emergency session, holographic delegates arguing across light years. "This cannot be a single human," one representative insisted, scales of authority trembling in frustration. "Our sensors, our protocols, our defenses, none could fail without catastrophic error." Yet the evidence was undeniable. Logs, intercepted signals, and system anomalies traced a consistent vector. A human acting alone had penetrated secure systems, neutralized defenses, and retrieved a critical asset without detection until the final phase of departure. Caleb observed from orbit outside the contested sector, the city lights of distant worlds below, unknowing witnesses to the quiet storm. He reviewed the Spire logs personally, noting each misstep, each bureaucratic oversight, and each act of casual cruelty that had permitted Elena's death. There was no rage in his movements, only precision. Every failure had a consequence, and every consequence was enacted with the detachment of a predator executing instinct refined over decades. Attempts to intercept him escalated. Mercenary fleets contracted by Spire leadership and rogue council members were dispatched, light years of pursuit arranged with urgency. Caleb anticipated each maneuver. His ship, unassuming and unarmed in appearance, avoided detection through techniques derived from human stealth operations long forgotten by the galaxy. Fleets arrived to empty space, systems scrambled to misread coordinates, and communications collapsed into incoherence. Humanity's patience and discipline outweighed brute force. A senior council official, pale-scaled and tall, finally demanded an audience with Caleb. Communication channels were opened for a single encrypted exchange. "Why do you interfere?" the delegate asked, voice tense, almost pleading. "Why would your species enact such disruption over the death of one civilian?" Caleb's reply was measured, precise, and chillingly calm. "You did not value her life. You assumed a human could be removed without consequence. That was your error." His words carried no threat, yet every syllable bore the weight of authority, a silent promise that the galaxy had underestimated its consequences. The exchange spread quickly through council chambers and military command nodes. Humans were no longer invisible, no longer background players in interstellar politics. The quiet predator had revealed itself not through violence alone, but through the demonstration of skill, foresight, and unyielding resolve. Systems that had seemed infallible now appeared fragile, dependent on assumptions that failed in the presence of disciplined intelligence. Caleb returned to the detention spire for a final sweep, ensuring no loose ends remained. The officers who had overseen Elena's interrogation were confronted with evidence of systemic failure, recorded precisely, leaving no room for evasion. They were accountable not through rhetoric but through irrefutable documentation, every action logged and cross-referenced. Humanity did not act impulsively, but with consideration, ensuring that justice was measured, precise, and undeniable. Fleet commanders and mercenary captains began to hesitate. Intelligence reports warned that human operatives capable of the same precision as Caleb existed in numbers and networks unknown. The galaxy's assumption, that humans were fragile, petty, and incapable of meaningful projection, was shattered. Diplomats sent urgent queries, attempts at negotiation, but Caleb moved beyond negotiation. The objective was clear: restore balance, honor Elena's memory, and demonstrate that life, once dismissed, demanded recognition. The council attempted to escalate militarily, but every move was anticipated and neutralized without direct confrontation. Systems realigned, patrols rerouted, and redundant communications collapsed under calculated interference. No lives were lost unnecessarily, yet the galaxy felt the weight of human precision. Fear spread quietly like ink in water, through the ranks of bureaucrats, officers, and mercenaries alike. Caleb paused, reviewing the logs one final time. Elena's remains were secure, her dignity restored, and the systems that had failed her now bore proof of the error. He considered the galaxy's next steps. They had underestimated humanity, and the cost of that error had been made clear. Respect, not vengeance, was the message carried in every calculated ripple. Humanity would not seek dominion, but it would not tolerate dismissal. The Council, forced into recognition, issued statements acknowledging human procedural authority and codified protections for human civilians across sectors. The galaxy learned, often reluctantly, that there were limits to arrogance and assumptions. Caleb's mission was not yet complete, but the first phase of the Reaper Protocol had succeeded beyond expectation. Humanity had spoken quietly, decisively, and the galaxy had listened. As he departed the contested sector, Caleb allowed himself a moment of reflection. The quiet storm had revealed a truth few had anticipated. Humans were not to be ignored, underestimated, or dismissed. The ripple he had begun would grow, but it was the precision of its origin that mattered most. Humanity acted not with spectacle, but with intent. They did not demand fear, they commanded respect. The galaxy, for the first time, recognized the predator it had never seen. The consequences of that recognition were only beginning to unfold. Caleb entered the quiet atmosphere of Earth, the blue-green curve of the planet welcoming him like a long-forgotten memory. Elena's remains rested securely within the containment unit, preserved with meticulous care. 4 weeks, he had traversed the galaxy's blind spots, dismantled illusions of human fragility, and delivered silent, precise consequences. And yet, the journey was not just about enforcement, it was about closure, about returning the part of himself he had carried across countless light-years. The Reaper Protocol had been executed flawlessly. The detention spire's officers had been held accountable in ways that transcended mere punishment. Systems corrected themselves only after evidence was catalogued, mercenary forces recalibrated their understanding of human operatives, and the Council had been forced into recognition. Humanity had made its statement, quietly but irrevocably. Caleb had not sought fear for fear's sake. He had sought respect, the acknowledgement that life, no matter how small it seemed, carried weight. He arrived at a secluded facility on Earth, a place where bureaucratic noise could not touch him. Carefully, he removed the containment unit and set it upon the examination table. As he unfastened the seals, memories of Elena flooded his mind, not the recorded holograms of her defiance, but the small gestures, the subtle smiles, the way her presence had anchored him through years of human restraint and patience. For Caleb, she had never been just a civilian. She had been his compass, his reason to endure, the human standard he measured every decision against. Caleb spoke her name softly, his voice carrying across the empty chamber. "I have returned you," he said. "No one will claim you now. No system, no protocol, no arrogance of the galaxy can erase you." He laid her in a ceremonial preparation, a gesture that honored not only her life but the principles she had embodied: courage, clarity, and quiet resistance. In that moment, Caleb's expression softened, showing a vulnerability the galaxy had never seen in its quiet apex predator. Outside, humanity itself seemed to pulse, unnoticed, a subtle acknowledgement that the storm had passed and yet lingered in memory. Caleb's mind wandered briefly to the council, to the fleets, to the bureaucrats who had assumed they could dismiss a human life without consequence. They had learned, in the most efficient way possible, that the species they had underestimated had the capacity to measure and enforce balance with unerring precision. Respect had been won, but the cost had been intimate and personal. He reflected on his own nature. Caleb was not a hero in the conventional sense. He did not seek acclaim, nor did he revel in destruction. He was a guardian, a precise instrument of consequence, and the Reaper Protocol was both burden and privilege. Through Elena, he had discovered the depth of what he protected, and through his actions he had reminded the galaxy that humanity operated on a different timeline, one measured not in impulse but in inevitability. The galaxy would remember, reluctantly and permanently, that humans were not fragile, that a single operative could challenge entire fleets and bureaucracies with precision and patience. But Caleb's final act on Earth was not about demonstrating capability. It was about personal closure. He had navigated the galaxy's arrogance, enforced justice and restored balance. And now he could mourn, remember and honor in private, away from prying eyes. He lingered over Elena's resting form, contemplating the moments they had shared in fleeting freedom. Her intelligence, her courage, and her unwavering sense of self had defined him as much as the Reaper Protocol had defined his actions. She had been both inspiration and anchor, the measure against which he calibrated every calculated move across the galaxy. Her absence had driven him, her memory had guided him, and her presence, now restored in quiet dignity, offered the first sense of completion he had felt in months. Caleb activated the secure archival system, ensuring that every procedural misstep, every breach and every lesson learned was catalogued with precision. The galaxy would retain the knowledge, encoded and undeniable. Humanity had not acted recklessly, and humanity had not acted for spectacle. They had acted with integrity, efficiency, and unwavering moral clarity. The Reaper Protocol was not vengeance, it was justice, deliberate and unavoidable. The final phase of the protocol was complete. Caleb exhaled, the tension coiling in his shoulders releasing slowly. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself the barest moment of stillness. The galaxy, now aware of human capability, would move forward differently. Systems, fleets, and bureaucrats would consider human resilience before assuming dominance or dismissal. Humanity had been underestimated once, and that error would not repeat. As he prepared to leave the facility, Caleb paused, looking out at the expanse of Earth beneath him. The planet teemed with life, fragile yet defiant, every human a testament to persistence and ingenuity. He understood with quiet certainty that the galaxy's respect was not demanded, it was earned. Elena had been the catalyst, the proof of principle, and the embodiment of what humanity could endure and protect. And Caleb, her husband, had carried that principle across the stars, silent, precise, unstoppable. The final image in his mind was hers, eyes calm and unwavering even in the face of bureaucratic cruelty. And for the first time, Caleb allowed himself a faint smile. The galaxy had learned its lesson, the Reaper Protocol had been fulfilled, and humanity had demonstrated what it truly meant to endure, to measure, and to prevail. The quiet storm was over, but its echo would resonate forever.